Welcome to Queens of Quality. This is actually a one-off because Jennifer is not with us today. Instead, I have a guest, Steve Thompson, who I'm going to have him introduce himself in just a moment. Steve and I met at a Orange County Regulatory Affairs event where he was giving a talk on ethical AI. And that is something that is of the utmost interest to us. And so he and I are going to have a couple of conversations about that and bring them to you via podcast because we have some ideas. Steve, welcome.
It's good to be here. And so it's great to have these connections, and who knows where they go. I mean, when we first met, who knew that we would be here today talking about AI? But it's exciting. You know, I'm an advocate of it. I get excited about it, but it's scary too. So, and with your background in regulatory, pharmacovigilance, safety, all that, it's so important that we bring experts in the field in to help shape how AI is going to be used. So my background, quick, been in life sciences, started in 96, a year before Part 11, and accidentally fell into it in elementary school. I never wanted to be in quality or regulatory. I didn't know what it was. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. That's what I wanted to be, not here. But here we are today, and it is exciting. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast here.
Excellent. So, just to get started a little bit on the AI piece, I've been doing a lot of, research into this and work into this because obviously we want to be on the cutting edge. We want to see what's coming up next. We don't want to keep doing things the way that they've always been done. That's kind of our game, right? We hear that all the time. Like, this is the way we've always done it. And I know that I've said this before on the podcast, that that's the kind of stuff that actually, kind of makes me want to drive a spike through my skull. Like, this is the way we've always done it. And look at where we are now. So in some ways I look at AI and I think, it's not actually that new, but it is the shiniest tool in the toolbox right now. It's like when it catches the light, because this has been in the works for a very long time.
Yep.
And how do we use this in a way that is beneficial and not just running after the shiny things because we think, and, let's be really honest about it, in the industry, a lot of it is very capital driven as opposed to ethical driven. But there are also dependencies there. It depends on who you ask on that. So if you ask the commercial team, they're a little bit more capital driven. I don't think I'm going too far out to say that. Researchers, we have a tendency to be a little bit more on the, can we fix this kind of thing? So we have these different approaches. It's a microcosm of our world, right? That's kind of how it goes. So I sent this article to Steve yesterday that our program researcher had sent to me, asking for a comment on it because this is something that she's going to be writing about on behalf of Metis. And so thank you, Leanne. And part of this is the biggest tech predictions for 2024 and, powering the AI boom and, entering the age of like bionic prosthetics. And the piece that really snagged me was the AI powered synthetic patients. Now, this bugs me on many levels because I don't think we get it. I don't think we get how far we need to go to get to that point.
Right. Sounds cool.
Sure. but it's not something that's going to happen in 2024.
No, I hope not. Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, but we're not quite ready. So that's for sure.
And so we talk about, the people who are involved and, how we set up clinical trials. And I understand that this is something that has been set up as something that's in the future.
Mm-hmm.
We may see these synthetic patients. However, let's talk about the realities of where we are now. Take it, Steve.
So you mentioned several good points. One is, and I agree with you, this is the way we've always done it. You want to bang your head against the table. And, a good attribute or a good characteristic of a quality system is continuous improvement. So that's baked into pretty much everything. So this is the way we've always done it, is not continuous improvement. That's basically stagnation, which isn't good unless you want to create penicillin or something like that. But other than that, it's not really that good, right? So we've got to move forward at the same time. And I do agree. I mean, artificial intelligence is not new. I mean, what was it, the 50s, the 60s? I mean, we've been dealing with this for a long time. In college, I liked it. And even going to conferences and talking about it, like Okra and SQA and all the places that we go to, right, and talk about this stuff, it was always premature. But then what happened was generative AI happened, and it changed the world. And what happened is all of a sudden AI became not scary, but really fascinating, and everybody's using it for every different thing. And it exploded, right? So here we are today. Now everybody wants to get involved in AI, but it's like, slow down. We're not ready. And it gets to like the human in the loop. And the article you sent was fascinating because it talks about this synthetic patient and what does that really mean? It basically, one of the examples that they gave with the synthetic patient is that you can basically use this for the control arm of the study. You can look at the records of the patient. So it's either their current treatment, or it's either the placebo. And you can use this synthetic patient that is based upon a lot of data, but that's a problem as well. So not only is the use or fear of misuse, that's the biggest concern, I think, with AI, is when we look at the history, we have had catastrophes throughout our history, and those catastrophes has forced the agency, the government, to respond with laws to protect people. And that's the biggest fear, I think, with AI, is we're going to go too fast. Somebody's going to make a mistake. It could be a catastrophe. The laws come, and then it throttles us and holds us back. So although this is exciting, we have to proceed, and you mentioned it, ethically, responsibly, qualified individuals, not just this is really cool and I want to do it. We have to have qualified individuals. I mean, we're talking, AI, ML, mathematicians, data scientists, folks like you with your area of expertise. And, it takes a multidisciplinary team of subject matter experts to come together to make all of the, look at all of this stuff, risk-based approach, to figure it out, the best use of an application of AI. And is the data good? Is it biased? Is it not? So yeah, this all sounds really good and fascinating, but, and I think earlier in a conversation, you had mentioned guardrails, and we got to put these things in place to make sure we're applying this technology appropriately and ethically.
Absolutely. And, I like the idea of, guardrails and parameters on where we're going and what we're looking at. And yes, it is going to take all levels of expertise, all from different areas. And we do have a lot of people who are already like chomping at the bit to get involved, right? Like, yes, we absolutely want this. We want to see this happen. So how are we going to make those steps? How do we ensure that the ethical component is very strong in that? Because we can't just go running in and applying the algorithms to, we're going to go back and use the example provided in, the kind of things to look for 2024. Yes, there have been historical control arms for clinical trials using records of patients not directly involved in the study.
Mm-hmm.
And that is different than creating a wholly synthetic other being.
Right.
It's beneficial to look at the data. It's how we use it that's going to be the test.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. I mean, I could come up with a result, and I can use the result for good purposes or not so good purposes, or inappropriate, right? In an accurate way of using that. So how are we going to use the results from that? And I'd done some research and in the past, and actually all of this stuff is happening. This synthetic patient on a clinical trial for the placebo or current treatment, that's one thing. But if you look, there's already a whole bunch of stuff that's actually happening out there. There's a resource, the Medical Futurist, which I go to, which is pretty good. And I'm just looking at some of the information they have. There's like 16 different healthcare companies right now integrating Chat GPT. And this slide is a little bit outdated, so I'm sure there's a lot more. And then FDA approvals for artificial intelligence based upon algorithms in medicine. That's another slide. And you'd be surprised. I mean, it's going back from 2014, and this particular slide stops at 2019. So this isn't a relatively new thing. And the areas they're covering are cardiology, psychiatry, endocrinology, radiology. It just goes on and on, all of these different areas. So there's all of these applications that are happening all over the place. And this synthetic patient on a clinical trial is fascinating because, I mean, just look at the complexity on biology and how our bodies work. How in the world can we mimic this, and concomitant medications and all of this other stuff that's happening in a clinical trial, which human beings are in the loop, I mean, have been running it. But how can we move away from that and let an algorithm based upon data try to mimic biology and all of this other stuff? It's a big ask, right? It's a reach.
Well, I think that it is a reach, and that's part of the reason that we're here, is to try to figure out how to bridge that. Like, how can we create the bridge between all the data that we have and all the information that we need to actually make a difference in this?
Mm-hmm.
And I've used several of the, like, Chat GPT and Bard and a few others kind of side by side. I'm not as huge a fan of Chat GPT, although I do like the stories about some of the stuff that people have done with Chat GPT and some of the trouble that people have gotten into using straight up Chat GPT produced information.
Wasn't there a lawyer that just went to Chat GPT, got information, took it to court, and didn't read it, and made a fool of himself?
Yes. Yes, that happened. I believe that they are no longer practicing so much.
And that's from a lawyer, right? It's like, oh my gosh.
Well, there are all kinds of little things analogies we can make here, because,
Right.
Bard, Shakespeare, what did Shakespeare have to say?
Right. Yeah, like, what did Shakespeare say about Madonna, or whatever, some famous star, right?
I meant, what did Shakespeare have to say about the lawyers, but that's fine.
Different, yeah.
So we have these pieces. how can we make this better? How can we use this? My specific areas are quality assurance and pharmacovigilance. So how can we use this to build a better pharmacovigilance system? How can we use this? I think actually that where we can see the greatest gains in this is how we can use this to gather the data and sort the data for the building of a better risk management system and use it for like REMS, which is the risk evaluation and mitigation strategies in the FDA, and it's their risk management programs in the EU. Because what you're doing with that is you're trying to be proactive. You're trying to take a proactive look. Actually, you're not trying to take a proactive look. You are taking a proactive look at how we can prevent these adverse events from happening in the future, how we can prevent these reactions from happening. What can we do to lessen the negative impacts of these medical treatments on people? How does that work?
So if we could take a little bit of a step backwards for a second, just to kind of set the stage, and in my mind, to simplify it, when I look at technology maturity of organizations, and we can apply this to artificial intelligence, machine learning, generative AI, that AI, ML maturity of organizations. And then the way that I've mentioned it in the past and make it in my mind is a reactive, proactive, predictive, prescriptive, right? So a lot of companies are
Can you just repeat that?
Sure. Reactive, proactive, predictive, prescriptive, right? And it
I
rolls,
love that.
yeah, reactive, proactive, predictive, prescriptive, right? So if you're reactive, you're in trouble.
Yes.
You need to get on the ball. So you should be at least proactive. And some companies are becoming predictive. So if we look at our space, if you're reactive, proactive, get with it. You got to become at least proactive, predictive, right? And so a lot of people are in the proactive, predictive, and we can use that for artificial intelligence to predict something that's going to happen. Okay, cool. We could look at the data, we're predicting, but it's still human in the loop. People are looking at it and making decisions. When we get from predictive to prescriptive, that's a different ballgame, because proactive means I can foresee a problem. Here it is, figure out what to do. Prescriptive is we're handing off our control to technology to say, prescribe how to fix it and fix it. And so the human is moving away from the algorithm. That's where it's getting a little bit scary. And when we think about a synthetic patient on a clinical trial, we're getting into kind of an area, not necessarily prescriptive, but we're handing off a lot of control to the algorithms. But when we look at all of that stuff, where do we fit in the overall scheme of things? Where are you at? If you're getting into the prescriptive, you better make sure, like you said, the guardrails and stuff in place. You better have all of that. If you're just predictive, okay, we got human in the loop. And when we're doing the RIMS, like you're saying, the risk evaluation, stuff like that, when the human's in the loop, it kind of helps out, right? A bit. It kind of eases it, because we still have our finger on the pulse. But when we get into this really advanced stuff, we got to proceed slow. We're not quite ready for that yet. And it's not just AI, it's the data. It's how we use it. And have we collected it right in the past? These organizations, I worked at a company and we had like estimated 2 petabytes of information. That's a lot of data, but was it collected right? Was there integrity in the data? And just like if you put bad gasoline in your car, it's not going to run right. If you put water in your gas tank, you got a big problem, right? So how do we get that high octane good fuel to drive our AI engine? Otherwise, if we put garbage in, it's garbage out, right? And that is the problem. We've got to look at this data and figure out what we can use. And let's face it, there's bias in the data, right?
Right.
It's human nature. So we have to get rid of our own biases, and look at the data and extract that out. So we get the data, and then we figure out, are we even using the right algorithm? There's so many out there. Is it the right one? And so we got the data, we've got the algorithm, and then once it all works together, the results spit out. What do we do with the results? So we got a lot of moving parts in this system or engine that we got going on here. A lot of things to consider. It's hard for one person to be the master of all of this stuff. We need different people with different perspectives to contribute to this.
Absolutely. And that's the part, right? Because if you take the big piece of data and then you add into it, because what we basically want to do is pull out those inherent biases. And in order to pull those out, then we have to be able to identify them. And one of the ways that we identify those is by having different facets, right? You look at it from different perspectives.
Right.
So it's almost like an anthropological sourcing at that point. Because what do you observe as a potential issue? And in anthropology, they say that you can't take a look at your own society, right? So like you can't look at your own data and make any kind of an educated guess as to where the bias is.
Fascinating. It makes a lot of sense. I like that analogy, because if we're looking at our own selves, there's all of these preconceived notions and our own bias, and it's our perception of ourselves and our culture, and is skewed. It's me and it's my way, and so therefore it's right. It's like that type of thing, right? Even if you're wrong, you think it's right because it's you.
Exactly. And then, to add to it, then we also have, even from a research perspective, we have our own cultural biases. And we have, we all know this from breaking down this information for however many years we've been doing it. But, a prescription dose for an adult is not the same as for a child. We know that there are ethnic differentiations between how someone who is of African ancestry reacts to something as opposed to how someone of Asian ancestry reacts to something. We were talking recently at a gathering that I was involved with about different cultures' reaction to like ingestion of alcohol. So I have a cousin who is half Irish from my side of the family and half Korean from his mom's side of the family. And when he drinks alcohol, he gets flushed because of the way that the alcohol reacts in his system, right? Not everybody gets that. Some people do. It's for sure, there are genetic markers that trace that, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Same thing with different pharmaceutical products. Different backgrounds give different reactions, right?
Right.
So if it's only ever been tested on white males over 6 feet tall and over 200 pounds, it's going to react differently when that same dose is provided to a 5'3" 100-pound woman of any ethnicity.
Right.
Redheads. I'm a redhead. I react differently to pain medication and anesthesia.
Fascinating.
There's a genetic reason for that. So when I go to the hospital if I have to go under anesthesia, I let them know that I need more because I don't want to get up in the middle of it. Because it's happened, not to me, but I've heard the stories, and I'm not interested.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because me going to the dentist with Novocaine, I tell them it doesn't work. And, they'll give me a couple shots of Novocaine and they'll start to drill or whatever. And I'll jump out of the chair and they're like, you felt that? Yeah, I felt that. I told you that, Novocaine doesn't necessarily work. And I don't like it because I don't want my whole face numb for the whole rest of the day, but it just doesn't work. So what you're saying makes sense. And you mentioned the, children. So there's differences with pediatric, differences with geriatric, differences with, gender, right? I mean, so if we're going to create a synthetic patient, we're not going to create a synthetic patient. You need to create a population of synthetic patients, because that is the world and that is reality. So you're bringing up a really important point, that we just don't think, oh, a synthetic patient, one and done, this great algorithm, right? We have to look at all of these different facets, like you're saying, gender, race, genetics, even like how things get metabolized. And and a lot of it you don't know until you actually go through the studies. So we've got this AI model, but when do you do the AI model? Do you do it before you do these studies? Pharmacovigilance, PKMD, whatever, or do you do it after? Does that data feed into the algorithm? I don't know. I mean, the more we start to talk and think about it, it's just more questions come up than answers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, so where do you pick it? How do you pick it? Where do you build it?
Yeah.
What are you looking at specifically?
It takes a team, right? And I think that is what organizations are going to have to look at. It can't be an individual that loves tinkering with this stuff, so therefore they're going to be in their lab tinkering with this and to create the algorithm. And we were talking about bias. Okay, so we know this, right? So we were talking about capitalism, basically, on the commercial side, or making money on the commercial side, which is important. These are for-profit companies. They have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. They have to make money to survive, right? And that's helpful to us because they bring medications to the market. On the flip side, we have the early research, and we know there can be pet projects, and it introduces the bias. It's like, oh, this is what I've been studying and I did my thesis, or I'm fascinated and I love it, so I really want this to work. And we've seen this on audits and inspections where, people had these pet peeve project, or these pet projects that they push through, not pet peeve. That was a Freudian slip.
Yeah.
But they push them through because that is their interest, and they want it to work. So we've got these conflicting sides, make money or versus, create something I'm fascinating in and truly believe in. So that's why I think it takes we hear it all the time, a multidisciplinary team of subject matter experts. We have to bring that together to look at it. And it's not just the science, it's the ethics, it's the
Absolutely.
so many things. It's like we were talking about cultural differences and, gender difference. So you have to have representation. And even for these protected communities of folks, we have to have representation to make sure we're not repeating things from the past where we did experiments and we shouldn't have, basically. So,
and that's the big part of it also, because I have heard people talk about, oh, we can, with like decentralized trials, right? We can reach populations that we haven't been able to reach before.
Yep.
And one of the population groups that I heard people mention specifically were, First Nations or Native American peoples. And I was like, really? You think that they want to take part in a clinical trial? We got a lot of work to do before we can do that.
Yeah, based upon our past.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there is a lot of work that needs to be done before any of that's going to work.
So somehow we get too excited about the technology, right? Technology is always faster than ethics. We create stuff that
That is
we don't
correct.
know how to use, right? And then we make mistakes, and then we start to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? So right now is a golden opportunity for us. And excuse me. And instead of like going full steam ahead with the technology, we really need to stop, take a deep breath, and look at and you said it right from the beginning, the ethics involved in this. So how can we ethically proceed forward to make sure that the technology, the application of technology will be a success and not create a catastrophe that will throttle and hamper our progress in industry? So somehow we need to figure out how to do that ethically at the beginning and address the data integrity, address the bias, address the qualified people selecting the right algorithms. So I don't know. How do we do that?
I actually think that we already have discussed a solution to that, Steve.
We have an idea. Go ahead.
Because you know that's part of my thing, right? And that's what I tell everybody on my team. Like, don't just come to me with a problem. I need you to come to me with like a problem and at least 3 potential solutions, right?
Yeah.
So we've already talked about a couple of the potential solutions. And to get that closer, one of the things that Steve and I have discussed is something that we'll talk about on the next episode. Is that where we wanted to leave it? That we're going to talk about on the next episode?
It's exciting, and we're running out of time, right? But it's so exciting. So let's throw out the teaser there. But you have to come back, because we know when we say it, it's going to click, because we're already doing something that's kind of similar, but not. But yeah, I think we have a solution, and let's do that on the next podcast. It's very exciting. I think that is the magic or the golden key that's going to unlock this door, that we could proceed cautiously through, make a success, and avoid a catastrophe.
Absolutely. I think that that's perfect. And I'm going to make sure that Jen is coming to the next time, because this was very impromptu that we set this up.
Right.
Because she's really fantastic, and I know that she's going to have a lot to say about this too. So
the more the merrier. It takes a team. Let's do it. I'm excited.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to meeting with you more and talking more about this really fantastic topic of ethical AI and life sciences.
Awesome. Always a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Bye now.